Everyone. Back in episode 68, I did tips and tricks for new Savage Worlds GMs. That includes folks who were GMing before and were new to Savage Worlds, and completely new GMs who are playing Savage Worlds for the first time. Well, I want to continue on that and do more ideas, tips, and ideas for new Savage Worlds GMs. Everyone, I'm Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. We'd love your support. We'd love your input, emails, comments, likes, subscribes, all that good stuff. We'd love to have it. So what am I talking about today? So today I want to talk about some more tips and tricks for GMs new to Savage Worlds. Some of it might be a little more generic, but all of it I think is useful, and hopefully you get something out of it. If you've got ideas or you've got things that new Game Masters should know, put them in the comments. Let's all learn together. That would be fun. So the first one I wanted to put on the list here is, and it's been said many times, it's really generic advice. I'm, as a GM, in the problem department. I'm not in the solutions department. That's the player's job, player character's job. You come up with the scenarios and the ideas around what is the problem the players are trying to fix. And then the players, through creativity, come up with those solutions. Savage Worlds has a great example of that called the dramatic task. And there's a video on, or a couple videos on dramatic tasks on the channel. Players come up with creative ideas around how they can use the skills to get those tokens for the scenario you set out. You don't necessarily set out a scenario like in the book. They talk about a bomb diffusing where you say, well, first they got to cut the green wire, then they got to cut the blue wire, and then well, you could do that, right? And every roll's a repair roll for somebody, but you don't normally do that, right? You would make that a dramatic task. And a dramatic task now is let players, maybe those who are diffusing the bomb, yeah, they can use the repair, but others could use something like, hey, I can help understand the wiring better and see if there's a circuit board that might need something. So can I use my electronics? I might need to help get people out of the building. So can I use my persuasion or something along those lines so that I have something to do and I can creatively find a way of supporting what's going on in the main dramatic task action. So very cool. Again, you're creating problems, you're not creating solutions. That's up to the players. Encourage test and support. So if you're new to Savage Worlds from other game systems, sometimes test and support can be a little confusing and how they work. Got videos on the channel about test and support and how do you use them and what makes them interesting. So check those out as well. But test and support really helps those characters that maybe don't have something to do. They're not the best fighters, and they're not the best other things. They can use support to support others to do something more fantastic by, again, leveraging a creative use of their skill to say, I'm going to do this to support this other person by doing this crazy, interesting thing, or maybe not crazy, maybe it's just, hey, I can do something like our example of somebody who's trying to fix a piece of electronics. Somebody who's got good research might say, hey, I want to support them by seeing if I can find the schematics online, right? And they could get a bonus to the person doing that task. Tests, again, fantastic for somebody who's not a combat, is in combat, has certain skills, but maybe they're not just going to shoot or attack. They can use their taunting, they can use intimidation to get the foe kind of upset or riled up, and ultimately, if they fail their test, they can become vulnerable or even shaken with the proper roll or distracted, and that helps the rest of the party out. So really understand how interesting those can be and offer them to your players. So if you have a player in combat who says, oh, well, I'm not going to do anything this round, I'm not going to attack anything this round, say, hey, well, you could do a test because the fighter's coming up after, and if you get this guy off his footing through something that maybe you can do, hey, that makes it that much easier for your fighter coming up next. So always really understand them. Always really understand them. Really understand them. Next one, again, generic, but it's important that there's a Savage Worlds flavor to it, is only call for rolls when there's consequences. Don't have players roll just for the sake of rolling, and it doesn't matter whether they succeed or fail. Because players in Savage Worlds have bennies. And if they want to succeed, they can throw a benny out and re-roll. And that is a valuable currency. So if you've got rolls that are throwaway, and it doesn't matter what they roll, because there's nothing in, I'm going to call for, I don't even know, but I'm going to call for a roll that has no importance at all, and it doesn't matter whether you make it or not. Players may be spending a benny because they don't know it doesn't matter. And that's just frustrating, to spend a valuable currency on something that doesn't matter. Sure, they'll never know, right? Because you won't give up that there was nothing hidden behind this roll, but it's just not that great. It's not fun. It's a valuable commodity, and we don't want players to have to waste it. Related to that a little bit on from the player side is, also if rolls have consequences, maybe make it so that the players can't pile on, right? If you've got a scout who's up front and they're the ones who are going to see whether there's an ambush or not, they get the notice roll. The other players are probably going to say something. As soon as you say, make him notice roll, and he fails it or she fails it, they're all going to come and say, oh, well, can I notice too? Can I notice too? I want to, I want to see. Can I notice? You could say, yeah, or you could say, no, but you can support their roll. And of course, you need to say that before, because they need to plan the support before the roll. But let's say you're going to have somebody make a notice roll, and somebody goes, well, can I do that too? It's like, well, no, you can support. What skill, again, that creativity, what skill or something do you have that you can support the person who's going to make this roll? And maybe this notice of the bandits isn't the right one. Maybe you want everybody to make the roll. But the point is, there's going to be those kinds of rolls where it's really one person, and others might be able to support them to give them bonuses, but not everybody's going to make that roll. I've mentioned this in videos before, and I'll mention again, play your big bad smart. Let them use all the rules that the players can use. They can wild attack. They can do supports. They can do tests. They can do all the things that a player can do. And the reason it's important is when you've got new players coming in, or players who aren't really taking advantage of the rules, you as a game master taking advantage of everything that you possibly can do, including doing a test, keeping the bad guy, he's behind cover, but he's using a taunt. He's trying to taunt the players to get them kind of off their footing or whatever. The players will start going, well, I can do that too. Let me do that. And if you want to make those sort of things more exciting, you can take advantage of creative combat, which is a setting rule that's all about tests. So keep them smart and use that to teach the players the rules that they can take advantage of. Another one that I have that's a big deal to me, I think, is I let the players help with the bennies. When I'm playing live, like at a convention, I have a handful of bennies. And when players they're playing their hindrances, or they're doing something creative, they're doing something funny if we're playing that kind of game, it's very easy for me to just take a benny, toss it across the table, toss it into somebody's pile. Easy, I'm really good at driving bennies that way. Online, not so much, because now I got to remember to push the button, hit the plus key, or, and you get out of the flow a little bit as that's happening. So I definitely let the players call me on, hey, I've got the curious hindrance, and I just went in this door that says keep out, and I didn't tell the other players because I wanted to know why it was keep. Oh yeah, maybe I should give you a benny. Sure, I'll give you a benny. Maybe the players call them out and say, did you see what he just did or she just did? That was creative and interesting. Sure, you're right. That deserves a benny. So take advantage of the players to help you be more flowing with the bennies in that, because bennies are really an important thing in Savage Worlds, and it's kind of, I wouldn't say lifeblood, that's strong language, but it's definitely an inherent part of what makes the game a lot of fun. If you as a game master, and this comes from sometimes games that have very strong class systems where the minute you create a class, there's a huge amount of flavor. This barbarian feels like a barbarian feels like a barbarian. But if you're playing like the core rules and you feel like there's not enough differentiation for these first players, you got new players coming in and they don't feel like the thing they want to be, and they come from D&D or they come from some other game that this is very common, well, maybe start at seasoned. That gives them a couple of edges under their belt, a few advances, so they could have edges, they could have additional skill points, they could do a lot of stuff. And if they start a season, they can take advantage of a seasoned edge. So that might be a way of helping the player characters become a little more differentiated at the beginning of your campaign. Now, if you're brand new to Savage Worlds, this is going to be tough because now you've got extra things to learn. So this might make a lot more sense for an experienced GM who's trying to get players excited about the possibilities, and they're coming back with, oh, my character seems kind of generic. Yeah, maybe you throw them a couple of bones and make them not so generic and help them through the process of gaining a couple of advances, and they'll learn character creation, they'll learn building up a character. So there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do there. Just something to think about. Setting rules, next thing. Setting rules, look at them, understand them, take advantage of them, because they're so big on changing the flavor or adding to the flavor of the game that you're playing. So, if you've got something where you want the players not to get one-shotted, you don't want them to get, just taken down with one bad exploding roll, yeah, you might want to use wound caps, which is a setting rule that's already there to help you make that a little easier. If you want your players to feel like they're like every moment they have to really think hard about whether they're going to use a Benny, then you might use hard choices. I don't like hard choices, but I'm just using it as an example. Those are all things you can do that. If you want to make magic more crazy, you might use no PowerPoints or dynamic backlash. All the things you can think about as a new game master to take advantage of to make the flavor of your game your own. Related to that, and the final thing I'll talk about is curate your rules for your campaign. One of the cool things about Savage Worlds is there's so many settings for it. And the reason there's so many settings is it's a great place, general place to start a game and then build flavor around it. So you'll see these settings, they add new edges, they add new hindrances, they may modify the skills, take some skills away, add new skills, all for the flavor of what they're trying to do. And you can take advantage of that. I mean, you could buy those settings that are, a sci-fi setting that makes a lot of sense to you and has the things you want, or a cyberpunk setting, just bring that in and use it, and now you've got that flavor. But if you want to kind of curate your own campaign, think about that. Are all the hindrances make sense? Are there edges that don't make sense? I mean, obviously in a modern non-magic world, arcane backgrounds don't make sense, but that's an easy one. There may be others that you just think don't make sense for what you're trying to do. From a skill standpoint, if you've got, the skills in Savage Worlds are pretty generic and they're pretty broad. But if you've got something where it's very important that you have these things sliced apart, like you're in some high-tech cyber world thing and you think there's a differentiation between hacking and programming, well, maybe you do need a programming skill that's different than the hacking skill. You can do that. You can curate that. Now, you may want to, you may want to be careful with that and be very strategic and not just make a ton of skills, because remember, players have to spend points on these skills. You may also just decide that there's skills that the player should have. If I had a player character in my world here, in our modern day, right, probably should have driving, unless they're unique. Probably should have electronics because they all know how to use the computer and their cell phone. They may have other things that just make sense to have to go along with the other core skills that Savage Worlds has, like notice, perception, or notice, persuasion, that sort of stuff. Yeah, so take advantage of the fact that it is somewhat modular to make it your own, and take advantage of those settings that are out there and pull stuff from them. If there's a great thing in one of the settings, but it's not perfect for what you're trying to do, you can still pull that out and use it in what you're trying to do if it makes a lot of sense and it's a good rule and it's targeted. So as a new GM in Savage Worlds, use the rules as written to start with, but don't be afraid to curate and tweak and modify, because this game system lends itself to that. So that's some of the stuff. You're in the problem department, not the solutions department. Encourage testing and supporting. Call for roles when there's consequences. And remember, players are spending bennies to be successful. Play your big bad smart. Let them use the rules. Have players help you out with bennies. If you think you need real differentiation at the beginning of the game, maybe seasoned, or there's also a setting room called Born a Hero, which lets you grab an edge that's higher at a higher rank than, you know, novice. And then make your game your own. Setting rules and curating skills, edges, hindrances, that sort of stuff all makes a lot of sense. So once again, I'm Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. Love your support, comments, likes, subscribes, all that good stuff. And we'll catch you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.